To be honest, I had never actually planned to go to London on this trip. My travel agent had given me the option of 8 hours of layover in Beijing landing at like 2 a.m. or 2 days of layover in London. She's not a city I'm unfamiliar with, and before heading to Sri Lanka it would give me some time to just relax before the next set of flights. It would also give me a little bit of time to check out some of London's famed tea shops. While browsing through Fortnum & Mason's or taking tea at Harrods is all well and good, you simply will not get the same sort of feel that you do in a cozy London tea shop. That being said, I had heard of one such place called Camellia's Teahouse through the tea school I attended. I wanted to see if I could meet up with them.
Hi, my name is Ajit Madan from Camellia's Teahouse. So what got me interested in tea? I guess it's a bit of a long story. I mean, initially, I come from an Indian family, and being of Indian heritage, we've always been surrounded by teas from Darjeeling in Assam. And I sort of remember when I was a young kid, we always used to think about tea as almost like caviar. There was a brand of tea called Latche tea, which I'm not sure actually even exists to this day. But it was something that used to occasionally make its way down to our home, and then when we used to get it, everyone used to go crazy over it because it was a really high quality, beautiful tea. And that was really, when I think back about when I first started thinking about tea seriously, that was kind of the time when we started to pervade my consciousness, I guess. And my sister was also very much into tea and herbal medicine, and she kind of trained as a herbal medicine doctor. And we used to live together for many years, so her kind of immersion in herbs and teas and sort of well-being kind of washed off onto me as well. We used to spend a lot of time talking about herbs and teas and how we could combine them and create interesting blends and things. And so I guess the gestation of me entering the tea business was quite, started at a very young age, at the subconscious level, and then kind of slowly became more important to me. And about 3 years ago, I used to be an investment banker for my sins, but one of the nice ones, I hope, and it was something that I didn't really have a passion for, but it was a great job. And my sister, at the same time, she had just opened up her tea rooms, and really the idea behind the business was to have our own brand of tea, primarily based around kind of wellness teas. So all the health benefits of tea, using herbal teas, herbal infusions, as well as white and green teas infused with interesting ingredients. And it was a great concept for a business. And when I'd realised that I really wanted to leave the banking industry, it was a perfect time for me to come and join my sister in the business, to come in to try and take it from a small little tea rooms to something more global in its scope, because we actually both really passionately felt about wanting to be in an industry that involved around helping people, healing people. I was going to be a doctor sort of originally, and for me and Lubna, it was a perfect way to enjoy our passion but also help people as well. So that was just sort of a genuine reason behind it, actually. It's a really great question. When I first got into the business, I assumed that being the UK and being Britain, being sort of one of the ancestral homes of tea drinking, if you like, that tea culture would be very deeply ingrained in sort of British society. As it turned out, it wasn't. The Brits tend to follow the Americans in terms of consumer culture, and everything over the last few years had become very much tea bag focused, based around the fact that people didn't really have time to take tea, and the value of tea began to come down, and the sorts of teas that you would find in supermarkets tended to be the very cheap sort of quality fanning type of tea. I would say 3 to 4 years ago, the industry was fairly the poor cousin of coffee, But now us and many other tea companies are trying very hard to bring specialty tea sort of back into the consciousness of people, and we're working very hard to do that. We do a lot of tea talks. We try and teach people about how to brew tea, etc. And I think now, when I look around and I speak to our hotel clients and I speak to our sort of customers in the tea rooms, people just have a much stronger appreciation of tea, primarily based around the fact that tea is becoming much more sort of prevalent in terms of its health benefits, but also kind of associated with vintage tea culture, or kind of vintage culture has become quite fashionable. So you find a lot of younger generation in the UK are very much into vintage culture and dress, and part of that draws tea culture into it as well. So going out for afternoon tea with their friends, wearing vintage outfits, etc. So we feel that tea culture is quite strong in the UK. It still has some way to go, but it's making really good steps, I think. We're a little bit atypical as a business or as a tea brand in that, whilst we offer all the really nice sort of traditional teas such as Darjeeling First Flask, nice Assams, nice green and white teas from China and Japan, what we try and focus on and try to have a niche in is kind of our fusion teas, because one of our, particularly in these tea rooms, we're based in Soho, which is kind of a chic and hip part of town. We have a lot of young people who come into the tea rooms, kind of average age of like 25 to 35, and they tend to like the more interesting teas. So whilst we have a lot of people who love standard black, green and white teas, fusion teas for us is kind of where the cutting edge is in terms of the growth of the industry, and actually bringing younger people into an industry that, or into a beverage that's historically always been associated with kind of the older generation. And we've tried very hard to make it more appealing to the younger generation by playing a lot of music in our tea rooms, blues and jazz, and just making it a bit more informal, so it's more accessible to the younger generation. So that's kind of one of the things that we've been working quite hard on. And I guess the other side of our personality or business is that we supply a lot of five-star hotels around the world, and a lot of these hotels have fabulous, fantastic teas. But again, there are two things which they tend to fall down on, in our opinion, is that they often have just very traditional teas. So if it's going to be a herbal tea, it'll be chamomile or peppermint. If it's going to be a fruit tea, it's going to be a rooibos with some orange, or it's going to be some kind of an orange tea, or the standard black teas. And we've worked really hard to try and encourage them to tap into this new kind of area of teas and start to adopt some more of the interesting fusion teas, where you combine a tea with a fruit or a spice or a flower. And we're beginning to find that hotels are beginning to become really interested in it again, because I think they see their customers and their guests becoming much more savvy and sort of knowledgeable about tea generally. And so, as a consequence of that demand, they're now sort of coming to us and asking us for our advice around interesting teas, which is great. And the other thing that is my bugbear, and I'm sure is a bugbear of most people who work in the industry, is that you can go to a beautiful five-star hotel, the most expensive rooms and food that you can possibly imagine, but by the time the tea is drunk, it's overbrewed and sort of bitter. But people, the average layperson, will think it's because the tea's not good. So it's a massive mission of mine, and I'm like a lot of other people, just to tell hotels and people who serve tea to advise customers at the table either the timings around the tea, or to pre-brew the tea before they take it to the table, any way, shape or possible, just so that they get to taste tea how it should be tasted. So that's a major mission, and I spend a lot of time training up hotels and doing tea talks and that kind of thing to try and make people understand that there's a way to drink tea, really. It's a really good question, and it's something that both my sister and I think a lot about when we think about sourcing tea. I have to say that in the hotel industry, or the kind of the bulk or the high volume tea industry, organic is never requested, or it's not a critical aspect of you being a tea supplier. I think when we look at the tea range that we have here, I would say probably only 10 to 20% is organic. And it's not because we don't want it to be organic, it's because partly people don't ask for it, which is a little bit surprising because when I buy my food and drink, I always source organic foods where I can. But generally we find a lot of people don't ask for it. But more importantly for us is that it's very hard for us to get good quality, consistent supplies of organic tea. If we have a particular type of tea and it's organic, and if as a consequence of being organic, its sort of quality can fluctuate in terms of the quality of the tea. It's very difficult for me as a supplier to certain people and wholesale clients to give them a product that sometimes tastes kind of marginally different from their previous batch. So I wish that also I should say that organic teas are much more expensive obviously than the regular teas. And in this day and age where price is so important to the big volume tea consumers, it's actually very hard to sell organic tea into those kind of wholesale channels. We would love to have more organic tea. We tend to find that it's quite hard to source, and because we have like over 150 different types of tea, it's really hard to find all those different tea types in organic format. And I really hope that we can be able to, we can source some organic teas as we go forward, as the industry grows. In terms of fair trade tea, again, I've tried to source a fair trade tea, but I think there's some issues within the industry because it's very hard to get hold of them. And B, if you do get hold of them, there's a huge certification process that you have to go through, which I find if there was a way to kind of reduce some of that red tape, I would be much more open to buying it. But as it stands today, we buy organic when we can, or where we can. And if the prices go down a little bit and the quality is more consistent, then we would buy everything organic or fair trade. I think it's really bright and really beautiful. I think it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to look back in about 5 to 6 years' time to see how the industry has developed. I think that just generally, I think one of the things that's driving tea growth globally, but in the UK in particular, is just the, I guess, the health benefits of tea. But people are beginning to really understand about it. A lot of people like myself will go around doing a lot of talks around and trying to educate people about the health benefits. And we find in our tea rooms in particular is that we kind of get two groups of people. We get sort of the elder generation who have realised that tea is really, really good for them and really good for their bones and arthritis and other things that older people tend to suffer with, and they will come into the tea rooms and buy a lot of tea just purely based on the health benefits. So for example, pu'er is a great example for people who suffer with high cholesterol. And we also have a huge range of kind of wellness or herbal infusions that we have been designed specifically to help certain parts of the body. So we think the health aspects of tea is really important. The other group that come into the tea rooms and the ones we talk to are the guys who are not really so worried about the health benefits, but we just want something a bit more interesting and cool. So for example, if you get a group of young girls in their early 20s, they might all want to have chocolate tea because it sounds like a cool thing to do and it sounds really interesting, as opposed to having an Assam or a Darjeeling. We also design a lot of bespoke teas, like an Earl Grey, and we'll add flowers to it and different petals and different types of tea just to make really interesting blends. And I liken it a little bit like when the alcohol industry suddenly exploded into the younger generation. Like traditionally they just used to be straight up vodka or Bacardi, but now when you look in the shops it's all kind of flavoured alco pops with different colours and flavours which appeal to a younger generation. The same thing is happening with tea from our experience in the UK, and we like to think we're at the forefront of that in terms of how we sort of kind of design our blends. And I really think that tea culture is growing very strong, particularly within the younger generation, and hopefully that will sort of stay with them throughout their lives. So the bottom line is I think that tea culture and tea consumption is growing quite fast. I think that coffee consumption in the UK, from I'm no expert at all, but from what I see and from what I hear is sort of declining. So from my selfish perspective, I hope that continues, because I think tea is a really healthy, beautiful drink. You know, coffee's fantastic, but for me, you know, tea's the way forward. Lots of things. I used to be a very keen sports person, so loved to ski, and used to do triathlons as well. And unfortunately, I spend too much time working, so I don't have a chance to explore it that much. But very, very avid sports person. Also extremely passionate about food and drink. Both myself and my fiance are very much into Japanese cooking, and often host a lot of sort of Japanese dinners at home and cook a whole array of food. So very passionate about food and drink, just generally as a personality. And I think you have to be operating in this industry, really, because even to this day, even though I've made a gazillion pots of tea, every pot of tea to me at some level is a personal thing, and I do take pride in everything that I serve in the shop. So yeah, I think you need to be passionate about this business if you really want to be, you know, successful and really enjoy it, I guess. And I guess the other sort of prerequisite, I love travelling like most people, I guess, but love to travel the world and go and visit tea gardens whenever I can, which isn't that often these days, but hugely passionate traveller as well. I would say, firstly, just go for it, but before you go for it, just think about a couple of things. I think one of the things that shocked me before coming into the tea industry was just how competitive it was. There are, my goodness, so many tea companies out there, and they're springing up every day. So, you know, my top tip really is to do your market research. You know, not just sort of desktop kind of buying consumer reports, but actually get onto the street, go around, see what other people are doing, and if you think that your product or your idea has a niche, then you should go for it. But if your idea is to get some funky branding with the same tea that everyone else sells, it's not going to work, because you know, the supermarkets and all the shops are just bursting full of different tea brands, and they struggle to accommodate anything new unless it's very different or interesting. So be very realistic. And as I was saying earlier as well, you know, if you want to have tea rooms are great. A lot of people that I speak to have a kind of fairly romantic view of how it is to have your own sort of tea rooms. It's a very nice kind of holistic sort of lifestyle. You know, holistic meaning you earn some money, but also it's very enjoyable. It is, but it's incredibly hard work. And to have a successful tea rooms that actually make some money is even harder work. So if you have a strong constitution and you're ready to work very hard, then go for it, because it's a very rewarding industry to be in. It's a fantastic product. But it's purely from a business financial point of view, it's quite tough. Crazy hard question, because I just love, it's like asking, you know, what's your favourite song or your favourite movie? It's really, really hard to find an answer to that. But I would say, like, when I think about it, what do I go to? I guess in the morning I usually go, we have a really beautiful salon, and it comes from a very famous estate in Sri Lanka called the Kenilworth estate. So it's called a salon Kenilworth. It's a very nice long leaf, fairly malty tea. And it's, I just find I kind of love malty flavours. It's great without milk. It's also beautiful with milk, if you ever want it like that. And it's just kind of my comfort tea that I kind of go to in the morning. It kind of calms me down and sets my mood really perfectly. And I guess the other tea that I go for, it's not really a tea, but is just a herbal infusion of rosebuds. We sell these tiny little rosebuds, and I have quite a floral palette. And I know through my sister, who's the herbal medicine doctor, that you know, rosebuds or rose petals or rose water is kind of very detoxifying and cooling on the body. So if you're having a really stressful or a busy day, you know, just having a mug of rosebud or kind of rose water is really soothing and calming on the body, and it just sets my mood again to a calmer space. So they're kind of, in this busy time at the moment, they're my kind of two go-to teas really. But as I said, I love so many, it's really, really hard. I guess the other one I was actually mentioned to you is this fabulous oolong called Iron Warrior Monk, which no one ever seems to have heard of, but it's crazy expensive, but it's the most delicious oolong you've ever tried in your life. It's so many different levels and it's just so interesting, but it's unaffordable, unfortunately. So yeah, so I guess they're my three teas.